Field by field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Maizex is your source for high-performance soybeans and grain, silage, and grazing corn hybrids. Visit maizex.com to find your local Maizex representative.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. Well, as you heard yesterday on the program, a lot happening in the world of canola and the markets in China. And Canada's got itself involved in another scuffle, a trade scuffle with China. We're going to be talking about that a lot more here today on the program. We got a great lineup of guests. Lindsay, yesterday as the host, presented what was going on to you and some of the questions that we're going to be diving into throughout the week. And we'll continue to do that here today. We're going to be joined in the lineup today by Chris Davison. He is with the Canola Council of Canada. We're going to get the council's perspective on this. You have to think that they kind of knew this was coming based on what we've been hearing about these tariffs on EVs from China, as well as steel and aluminum as well, which is maybe a little bit undercovered. That tariff is 25%, while the EV tariff is 100%. So we'll try to find out from Chris how they see this and where do we go from here. We'll also hear today from Chuck Penner of LeftField Commodity Research, get a market perspective. We saw the market down substantially on Tuesday, limit down. The time of us doing this show, the market opened lower, but not to the same extent that we saw on Tuesday. And the other thing to keep into mind here is that this is an investigation into claims that Canada is dumping canola. This isn't like we saw in 2000, it'd be pre-23 during the Huawei CFO situation. That was where Richardson's and Viterra licenses pulled. So it essentially really stopped shipments because those were two largest shippers of canola to China. So this is a little bit different. So what do we do? How much friction do we expect to see in terms of shipping lanes to China from Canada on canola seed, meal, and oil? We'll also be joined today by Evan Shout. He is with Farmer Coach. He's also host of the Truth in Ag podcast. We got a big announcement today here on RealAg Radio. We'll talk a little farm management stuff with Evan as well. And also we got a product spotlight. That's right, with SeedMaster. Tim Criddle will be back on the program. Love having Tim on, and we'll talk about what's going on over there at SeedMaster. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely give me a call, 855-776-6147. You can also send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find Real Agriculture throughout all the different social media platforms for sure. Other big news today is, as expected, I would say, the Bank of Canada made the decision to cut interest rates again. And they making the comment they need to see economic growth. It needs to pick up. A little bit of concerning words out of the Bank of Canada today. So, story in the Globe and Mail, the Bank of Canada lowered its benchmark interest rate for a third consecutive time on Wednesday and reiterated that economic growth needs to pick up so that inflation doesn't fall too much, paving the way for additional rate cuts in the coming months. So definitely it looks like this isn't the end of it for 2024. Of course, we're still looking at the U.S. in terms of what they're going to do with the Federal Reserve. We've got we're 75 basis points lower than we were from the highs. Now, as I mentioned, this was an expected move. The central bank reduced its trend-setting policy rate to 4.25% from 4.5%. The private sector expects several more cuts over this year and 2025 as a part of an easing cycle that brings borrowing costs to less onerous levels. We talked about this on RealAg Radio on Friday on the RealAg Issues panel. This was expected. And the question is, how low will we go based on the concern here about the economic situation in Canada. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to hear from Chris Davison. He's with the Canola Council of Canada. He'll join us when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Farmers Edge Laboratories is here to support growers, agronomists, and retailers this harvest season with their soil testing. Experience superior customer service, fast results, and volume discounts with Farmers Edge Laboratories. Contact 204-233-4099, 204-233-4099, or email fe.labs@farmersedge.ca. The lab is now open to the public, agronomists, and retailers across Canada. Farmers Edge Laboratories, proudly serving Canadian agriculture for over 15 years.
We're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. Make sure you check out canadabeef.ca. The new campaign, Pick the Beef with the Leaf. We are joined right now by the president of Canada Beef. It is Eric Bienview. What is the true role of Canada Beef in the sector?
Essentially, two sentences. Create value. For whom? Our producer and the entire value chain of the beef industry. Our goal is to make beef the protein of choice. That's it. How do we do it? Consumer marketing, channel marketing, global marketing, intel, research and development on nutrition, health, as well as the underutilized cuts to enhance the consumption. We have 300 cuts of beef. So what do? We're trying to optimize and increase value. Stakeholder communication, and drive growth.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by FP Genetics Hybrid Fall Rye. Innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy and discover Hybrid Fall Rye's flexible end uses like for marketing, milling, distilling, ethanol, and feed. Visit hybridfallrye.ca to learn more. Lots of versatility when it comes to hybrid fall rye indeed. Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to be hearing from Chris Davison with the Canola Council of Canada, Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture here every Tuesday here on the program as the host, as well as on the Friday Issues panel. She caught up to Chris Davison on Tuesday afternoon. Let's hear what Chris had to what he had to say about the situation.
Right. Joining me now is Chris Davison. He's president and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada. Chris, it has been a bit of a roller coaster of a day, certainly, starting with the news this morning from China, with a retaliation to Canada announcing EV tariffs. And we've seen this before where canola especially, but Canadian ag products get caught up at times in some of this politicking. What is the latest? What do we know so far as to China's announcement today?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lindsay. You're right. It's been a busy day leading off with this communication from the Chinese government. What I would say to start is while there has been an investigation that's been announced, we haven't seen any details about what that investigation is going to look like, other than an indication that it is seed focused. But in terms of the duration, the scope, the process, etc., that, to the best of our knowledge, has not been communicated yet.
Okay. Now, we have seen certainly in the past where Canadian canola has faced at times other trade barriers, phytosanitary issues, etc. However, China has announced this is an anti-dumping investigation. What might that entail as far as what they might be looking at, as far as the numbers from Canada? What does an investigation like that even entail?
Yeah, so look, we don't have any indication of what numbers might look like. And I want to be clear that as part of the announcements that we all saw today, this was one of several different measures that were positioned as a response to actions taken by the federal government that you alluded to. Some of those, it was suggested, will involve the WTO, and others will, it would seem, involve the domestic Chinese government. And typically, when we're talking about anti-dumping. That's typically where a domestic government imposes tariffs on imports for reasons related to market value, etc. So that's about all that we know at this point in time, as I said. And so we will obviously be tracking this very closely to see what else we learn about the investigation itself. What I will say, even with what we know today, is we will support the investigation as appropriate to demonstrate, the fair access and competitiveness of Canadian canola. We need to learn more about the process, as I said, but certainly we will be there to participate and support in an appropriate way.
Now, one of the key things, of course, you've mentioned is at this point, this is the announcement of an investigation. This isn't an announcement of any sort of tariff or anything that has been applied. That becomes, though, of course, an unknown. We are, of course, in the thick of harvest here in Western Canada and of this canola crop. Certainly from the farmer's perspective, makes them quite nervous, but I would imagine from a grain company's perspective as well. What could this mean? Could we see companies having perhaps less confidence in making sales to China, knowing that this is ongoing, or how does the industry sort of digest this news?
Yeah, so obviously I think it's safe to say that probably everyone in the canola value chain would be disappointed with this action. I'm also going to say that, again, depending on where this process goes, though, that we're also confident that an investigation into Canada's canola trade will certainly demonstrate alignment with and reinforce our support for rules-based trade, which I think is really, really important. And that gets back to the heart of your question, because certainly farmers and the rest of the value chain want to avoid unpredictability when it comes to access to markets. And so our job one, as it always is, but takes on more importance in situations like this, has got to be about maintaining or restoring open and predictable market access for, in this instance, Canadian canola. And that has to be a priority for us. And that's what we're going to be talking about with the membership and the broader industry, engaging with the federal government and others in terms of how best to do that.
Okay. All right, Chris Davison, thank you so much. I know this has been a fast-moving story, so I do appreciate your time, and we'll be updating as we can on this. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Appreciate Chris Davison giving us some time there to discuss, what exactly is at work here. It looks like there's a lot more information still to come to the forefront for us to better understand how all this plays out. Is this something that can be rectified? Like, it is a decision made on this in 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, 24, 36? And who's making that decision? Is this a decision that's being made inside China, or is this the decision that's going to go to the WTO? That, I think that's an incredibly important component of this. That's one of the pieces to really watch. It is very much in Canada's favor if this is something that is decided by the WTO. Okay? And I'm not saying that because I think the WTO is more likely to side with Canada than China. I think it gives Canada a little bit of a more fair shake at talking about the finer points, the details here of their position and what's really at work here. Now, if this is a decision and the judge and jury are domestically in China and this is just something they can rule on, well, then we got a different problem. We got a bigger problem. All of a sudden, Canada's stance on fair rules-based trade, I'm not sure we're going to get a very objective sort of jury, so to speak. So I think watch that. Where's the decision being made? And those details, I've seen different media outlets reporting different things or speculating on different things. And Chris sounded unsure there as well. So that's the key to watch. Another key is, how does the Canadian government react? Now, what we heard out of different, like the trade minister and the minister of agriculture, is we've heard that Canada believes in rules-based trade. Okay, so that's one thing. But do they back off of these tariffs, these 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs? I almost said RVs, but they're EVs, electric vehicles, and a 25% tariff on Chinese-made steel and aluminum. Do they back off of that position? I'm doubtful of that. because we not only do we have the government of Canada that has made this decision, we've also got the opposition party. The Conservatives are just as in favor, it seems, as the Liberals are on this policy. So I know there's a lot of people running around saying that, look what Trudeau did to us, but Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has the same position. And there may be some nuance there, but was tweeting last week about how he supports the idea because both parties are really going after the union vote, auto sector and steel and aluminum sector. So that's the narrative. So I don't see that changing at this point. Okay. One of the other pieces that Lindsay didn't get into with Chris due to time constraints was the longer this goes on, the more the market goes to the downside. Do we start to see some sort of talk more and more about compensation for growers? That's another piece of this that I think it may be too early as of this week, but it's something that could build over time depending on how low that canola future goes. So all stuff to be paying attention to and staying on top of as this story continues to develop. And how do the Americans react to all of this? Or do they move and do something to, in retaliation on Canada's behalf? I'm not as certain of that. I don't expect them to do that, although Canada, the main reason for doing this was union jobs and falling in line with what the Americans were doing themselves as a trade strategy. It's just Canada's getting the retaliation. So we'll have to watch what the U.S. does on this front. There's a lot of moving parts here. And sometimes some of this trade policy stuff is rather complex. and we try to go to some of the experts to try to find some answers. From a marketing standpoint, we are going to hear from Chuck Penner of LeftField Commodity Research a little bit later on in the show. We're going to ask him to try to shed some light here on how all of this is impacting the markets overall on canola, as well as your marketing decisions steering through some of this new noise and chaos that's entered the marketplace, a variable completely out of your control. And what does he think about what China's doing from a trade policy perspective in this case? So we'll do that. But first, when we come back, we're going to talk to Tim Criddle. He is with SeedMaster, and he's going to be joining us for a product spotlight. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with SeedMaster. We're joined right now by SeedMaster's Global Director. It is Tim Criddle. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Shaun. And yourself?
Hey, doing very well. So, Tim, let's start off. There's this cool new program you got going at SeedMaster. It is called the Ultra Wheat Yield Guarantee. What is this?
Well, Shaun, I can tell you that we've had over the years, for about 5 years now, that we've had the Ultra SR in the market. we have a lot of interest in the product. We go to a show, we go to field days, and people are clamoring to it because, really in the last 10, 15 years, there's been not a lot new developed for the seeding industry, tweaks to sizes and capacities. But the Ultra SR is really a revolutionary seeding solution. It's like a hybrid between an air drill and a planter, in that you've got a single pass air drill machine. You put your nutrients down at the seed at the same time, but you get that ultra pro metering with that seed singulation. And so people are looking at it saying that's a really cool solution. And they say, we have no doubt that that's going to be fantastic in canola. It's going to be fantastic in pulses. But then they run into a mental roadblock when it comes to cereals. And they say, gosh, I'm not sure that the Ultra SR is going to be a solution for me in cereals because it's at 15-inch spacing. And really, the fallacy there is born of the fact that a lot of the yield data related to row spacing a lot of that data goes back to the 80s, back when there were more conventional tillage practices. Since then, we've got direct seeding, we've got far better soil profiles in terms of moisture preservation and nutrient management. And it's a fallacy to assume automatically that 15-inch spacing is going to yield less than 7.5, 10, or 12. And our owners have been proving this year after year after year. They say, you know what, I'm just not getting that yield drag that I worried that I was going to have. As a matter of fact, I'm actually outperforming some of my neighbors. That's happening. So we thought, well, for all those customers that are right on the fence and they say, I want to believe, I truly want to believe, but I'm really worried about yield in my wheat, we said, well, look, let's guarantee it. Let's put together a wheat yield guarantee. And the way the program is going to work is that a farmer can buy a brand new 2025 model year Ultra SR, and they can sign up to the program where they can allocate a quarter section of land, 160 acres. They can divide that in half, and they can seed half of that with the Ultra SR, and they can seed the other half with a drill of their choice, with the spacing of their choice. And at the end of the year, we're going to verify which half out-yielded the other. Now, if the Ultra SR out-yields the other one, great. It's what we anticipated. If the Ultra SR has a yield shortage compared to the other half of the field, we'll actually pay the farmer the difference. We'll make it up to them. Now, we'll make sure that the seeding rate or the nutrient package is the same for both. We want to be there on the day, seeded at the same time, all the normal parameters. But again, this is just our way of saying, look, the market needs to understand that yield drag that people think is going to be there, it's really not. And if that's the biggest roadblock to getting into one of these, then let's remove that barrier.
Yeah, the little bit of competition, Tim, I like it. And this is you standing behind the product, putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Well, it's bold and audacious, but it needs to be. We feel like it's incorrectly being shoehorned into being just a canola drill. And it's not just a canola drill, it's an everything drill. And the farmers that own them are running them and that are growing fantastic crops across the board, they're believers. And we're really happy when they come out and say good things about it. But, we just figured we just needed to punch our message up a little bit and stand behind it with a guarantee.
So from your perspective at SeedMaster, why should farmers choose the Ultra SR? Why is it a solution that they really should be considering?
Well, it's an overall, tremendously efficient seeding solution. There are a lot of reasons to look at it, and they're not all related to, say, wheat yields. I guess number one is that there's a tremendous savings to be had because it is like a hybrid between an air drill and a planter, in that we get planter-like singulation, near zero seed mortality. So right off the hop, you're looking at probably $30 an acre savings just in canola alone. Plus, you're going to grow a fantastic canola crop. You're not going to sacrifice in any other crops that you're going to grow, cereals or pulses. The capital cost is lower than a toolbar and an air cart. So you've got some iron savings right up front. Horsepower requirements are lower than pulling a conventional drill with a toolbar and a new cart. So that probably means you don't have to go out and buy a new $1 million tractor as well. So add up all of those savings, fuel savings, time savings, efficiencies, You've got a 60-foot drill, 750 bushel capacity, so it's not like you've sacrificed anything there. And unlike a planter, it's a single pass air drill. You manage your nutrient package at the exact same time as your seeding, so you're not looking at making additional passes. So just all around, from an efficiency point of view, the ability to grow a fantastic crop and not actually sacrifice anything along the way makes the Ultra SR an ideal seeding solution in Western Canada.
Listen, if you want to find out more about the Ultra SR, you can go to seedmaster.ca or, of course, talk to your local dealer of SeedMaster equipment. Hey, Tim, thanks so much for joining us here today.
It's always a pleasure, Shaun. Thank you.
That is Tim Criddle, Global Director for SeedMaster. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 right after this.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farm operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPeak, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Busy week, even though it's a short one because of the Labor Day holiday, but harvest well underway in most of Canada. Lots happening. Lots also happening out there in the markets as well. We're joined by Chuck Penner of LeftField Commodity Research here in a second. But first, I want to tell you about nitrogen fertilizers, your farm's number one expense. You know this. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. Security and earnings through ownership of the solution. Visit Genesis today at genesisfertilizer.com. As I mentioned, Chuck Penner of LeftField Commodity Research. Chuck, how are we doing?
Doing okay, hanging in there. It's it's been a bit of an interesting week.
It has. We saw the market down on Tuesday on the news that China is looking or accusing Canada of dumping canola. I guess before we get into the market reaction, what's your sense of that accusation and the potential validity of it? Any insights there?
Well, I hate to use four-letter words, but bunk would be one of them that I would use.
Well, that's where you went. Oh, my goodness.
See, I just turned 60 yesterday, so I can use those kind of words, right? Yeah. Anyway, no, there is no basis in it. The accusation has been that, well, canola exports to China had really been booming in 2023. Well, that's just because all of the restrictions that China had put on Canadian canola, as your partner there pointed out on Twitter, they had put these restrictions on, and they only came off in late 2022. So it was just, the market returning to normal. So the changes in trade flows, increases in imports have nothing to do with whether there's been dumping going on. And the fact that, they talk about, well, it being below the cost of production. Well, again, like, who has control of that? Do farmers have control of whether they're selling below the cost of production? No. We are dealing with big Australian crops and, big Ukrainian crops and so on in 2023. So it was just a normal market reaction that prices did what they did. So, no, there's really no basis, but we already know that, right? We know that it's a political decision. It's retaliation, and in fact, they said that in their press release. It was related to the tariffs that Canada wants to put on EVs and on steel and aluminum and those kind of things. So it's just the game that China plays. It's I would say it's very similar to the situation that Australian barley went through a few years ago. I would say there's some pretty strong parallels there, and that's kind of what I'm using as a bit of a guide. The problem is that I don't think, I mean, unless there's some, unless Canada would backpedal on some of these tariffs, and I don't think they will. I don't think we're going to see China backing down on this investigation either.
Okay, so it's an investigation. So I want to make sure we have clarity here on what's happening. Canada can still ship canola to China, even though this accusation or investigation is underway, correct?
That's correct. And again, if you use the Australian situation, barley situation as the template, that investigation took 18 months before they announced the tariffs, which ended up being 80%, and shut down trade completely. So that took 18 months. The Chinese documentation says it can take up to a year, and they can extend that by another 6 months if need be. So it's not an immediate shutdown. It's not even a short-term kind of a thing. And so, that's I guess the good news is we have some time to prepare,
right.
And it's not going to be the immediate catastrophic kind of a situation.
Yeah, different than what we saw pre-2023 with the Huawei CFO related canola issue, where they targeted Richardson's and Viterra and said, "Hey, you can't export." So essentially locking things really down, really preventing canola from being shipped. And at the end of the day, we can get into some of the canola ended up there anyway through other means. In this situation, it almost looks like they forced like you go to Costco or you go to Sam's Club and things are on sale. Like the market goes limit down on Tuesday. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. The market has definitely opened lower, not to the same extent. So things are on discount. And, does China just walk in and say, well, thanks for the discount, Canada, that we really appreciate this?
Well, not only China, but maybe some
Others.
other buyers as well too. So yeah, that's certainly the case. I'm not clear how much gets traded in the last day or two at these levels, but it's certainly an opportunity for that. Again, if I go back to I'll probably do this a couple of times.
Go ahead.
Is this Australian barley thing? So when that happened, and that lasted for 3 years, so that's the in this whole situation, right? But what happened is that Australia had to find other markets for its barley, and really had to discount it. So they moved it into the Saudis, but also Thailand, Vietnam, like a whole bunch of countries that they normally don't export to. But what that did was it brought Australian barley values well below where the rest of the world market was trading. They just had to blow it out the door. We're not facing that same kind of a situation to the same degree with canola, but we may be at a situation where Australian canola becomes the premium market, and Canada trades at a discount. And that's a little different than we've had the last couple of years, where Canadian canola has been trading at a premium because of the strong crush demand domestically, but Canadian canola has priced itself out of some of these markets, like Mexico, even Japan to some extent, Pakistan, UAE, a number of these markets. And so, yeah, it does have a depressing effect on the market for sure. But it's not like we won't be able to ship canola. It's just we won't be able to command the premiums. The outlook early in the season had been we had been pretty bullish on canola, and now it's not that we're turning bearish, but yeah, it's a lot of that enthusiasm or whatever has kind of faded with this.
Yeah, and I would imagine grain companies and exporters, it creates caution for them because they don't want to have a boatload of canola and concerned, well, it just doesn't get there in 24 hours, right? There's some duration risk on that shipment and not being able to deliver if China takes a more extreme measure in the meantime. It does increase the friction of the flow of the product, does it not?
Yeah, I would think so. I think there's a little bit more sanity after the initial reaction yesterday, there's a little more sanity and a little more, what does this actually mean? I think, it could be the situation where even if there are trades that have happened that haven't shipped, or if you have a bill of lading and it will still not get tariffed or whatever. And again, we may be months away from that happening. So, the other thing that could happen is that Chinese crushers, are looking to really stock up, A, because the prices are down, but B, because they want to have some large inventories that they can work from. So it may trigger an even larger early movement of canola in the beginning of the year. And whether that provides a little bit of price support or not, a little bit hard to say.
A common text that I had on Tuesday from the audience was, and I honestly say that I agree with them, is we cannot build canola crush capacity fast enough here. And if this isn't a reminder for you about why those initiatives and that capital was flowing in, tied to obviously SAF and renewable diesel, this is a pretty stark reminder for you.
Yeah. We just finished 23-24 marketing year, and we crushed a record crop or record volumes of 11 million tons. So we've never done that before. We did 1 million tons alone in July. So that means that theoretically we can crush 12 million tons. If you do that every month, 12 million tons in 24-25. But yeah, it's already an improvement over where we were when we had the last shutdown from China on canola. We're already in better shape, but, and we can also benefit, I think, we're going to get stronger demand from Europe. And again, these lower prices may spur more demand and so on. So we may not miss the Chinese market as much as we did the last time around. Yeah. It's still not, I'm not trying to downplay it, or I'm not trying to say there's no problem here. I was quoted in a newspaper article and I just saw it today and I went, oh, I wasn't quite saying that.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, but it is different than the last situation. I think, and it's also different than what's been going on with Canadian beef to China as well, where that has to do with, again, licenses with plants. So this is a different scenario, but I think there's a lot of concern out.
Yeah, there's a lot more shuffling of deck chairs too, because last time around we were still exporting a whole lot of canola oil to China.
Right.
So they were getting a lot of canola oil from Canada, and now they haven't bought canola oil from Canada for probably a year, maybe longer, because it's all going into the U.S. For renewable diesel, or a lot of it for renewable diesel. So China, what are they going to do for canola oil? They can get some from Russia. But again, we may do much larger flows of seed into UAE, where they crush it and then they ship the oil off to China. So, we can work around that. Although there are questions about whether this is going to apply to canola meal and to oil as well. The oil is a non-issue, but the meal, that could be an important factor too.
Curious what the U.S. does, and not necessarily related, in retaliation for Canada, but you and I have talked, and a lot of people in the market space have been talking a lot about this UCO coming out of China, and what, and there's a lot of people in farm country in the U.S. very upset about that volume of UCO that has been coming into the country, competing with crops like soybeans. So I think that's a piece of this story that'll be interesting to watch here over the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think we're close to some kind of a decision there from the U.S. I don't know that it can help. It can help soybean prices in the U.S. for sure, and so you get some spillover support. But again, we're crushing at capacity in Canada, and even U.S. canola crushers are running full tilt. So we can't process a whole lot more within North America. But again, that would boost soy oil prices. So the crush margins should improve, and so then they can bid more for canola seed and so on. So there's some potential of support from that, and I think that's long overdue, that kind of a decision from the U.S.
Okay, so from the farmer's perspective, reaction to this, keep our wits about us. Obviously, we want to stay disciplined. No need to panic, but we're long inventory. And everybody has a different amount that is unsold, some zero, and some probably have sold the majority of their crop. What do farmers do here right now as we trade off of 576 in November? We're at the pretty close to the 1 year low here. What do we do now?
I think it is being patient. I think it's still being patient. That's what we've been telling people is to be patient even before this happened. I think that's still the case. I think this has a longer time frame, and so we don't need to panic, as you said. And I think there's still room for that. We're strong on thinking in terms of seasonal price behavior. So we're at the seasonal lows now. So this just brought those seasonal lows a little bit lower, but I still think there's room for prices to recover. This will just limit how much how quick that recovery is, or how much that recovery is. But no, there's nothing to say that this should trigger, oh boy, like dump it all before it gets even worse. I don't think that's the message we want to be putting forward.
Yeah, before we wrap up here, Chuck, any comments about the overall commodity complex, what we've been seeing?
Well, again, it's, we do think in terms of seasonals and a lot, and not that prices follow them every year, but we're seeing markets for special crops, for wheat, for a number of these crops, starting to level off, or even maybe turn a little bit higher and things like that, which is very much in keeping with seasonals. So that's the reassuring part. It's just more the strength of how quickly or how much we come off those harvest lows. But it's keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, have a plan. Hey, Chuck, really appreciate you joining us here today on RealAg Radio. Thanks. All the best to you.
You bet.
Hey, that is Chuck Penner, LeftField Commodity Research out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Great work, him and his team, providing some perspective there on what's going on with canola relative to this China investigation of anti-dumping. Hey, we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, protect your anhydrous ammonia, and bottom line, even if temperatures hit 15 degrees. I hate when we get below 15 degrees. But so think about Centuro. That's not too late to apply. Agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro nitrogen stabilizer. You can learn more by going to centuro.ca. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that we have a big announcement today. And, it's kind of I left you kind of all hanging. Joining us right now to talk about what we are announcing today on the program, it is Evan Shout. He is with Farmer Coach, also host of the Truth in Ag podcast. Evan, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, Shaun.
Hey, before we get to the announcement, how's harvest going over there?
Slow. I mean, if the rains would stop hitting every single day, I think we'd be a little further along. But based on other areas of the province, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut today, Shaun, just because I don't want to poke the bear. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there's definitely variability across the province of Saskatchewan for sure. Alberta's the same. I think very similar kind of boats. Depends on who you talk to, and they could be 5 miles apart. And we're seeing a lot of variability there for sure. Today we're going to talk about farm management and a big announcement that we're making. You and Christian Hebert have been doing the Truth in Ag podcast, a great podcast that, when did you start it?
It's been about 3 months. I want to say we've done 10 episodes, I think, recorded. So it's enough enough that I'm getting used to it a little bit. I'm starting to speak a little easier. Let's put it that way. What you've done all these years, I realized isn't as easy as I maybe thought it was back then.
Yeah, here's one piece of advice: don't go back to the beginning and re-listen. Just listen to recent ones. Don't go back to the beginning. I would never listen to some of those things from early 2010 at all. And really focusing on some of the key issues that are happening from a farm business and management perspective, but also a lot of other areas you've dived into as well. And what's kind of exciting here today is I like associating RealAg with really smart people doing some cool things. And we are super excited here at Real Agriculture to announce that we're going to be collaborating with the Truth in Ag podcast, and we're going to be distributing the Truth in Ag podcast through the Real Agriculture channels as well, on top of all the distribution and ways that you've been, your YouTube channel and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, the things that you've already been doing. But people can also get it at realagriculture.com through our podcast and YouTube channels as well. So this is going to be a fantastic, exciting collaboration.
Yeah, I think what we realized early on is, when we launched it, we didn't know what we were doing really. And it came quick, but at the same time, we also realized the reach of agriculture. And we've obviously all seen your podcast for multiple years here, Shaun, what you kind of created the industry for us. So instead of trying to recreate and go up against you, we thought, you know what, collaboration wise, why wouldn't we just join? We rely on our networks, whether it's on the farm or on the consulting or coaching. So for us, it was just the next reasonable step is jump in, get some distribution, and then let's see what we can do together. Yeah.
And so talk about some of the topics that you have discussed on the podcast so far, because, the first one I watched was, and I think you said this was your most popular. It was actually a farmer talking about, his farm business and what he's doing with his operation. But there was also quite frankly, a very sobering story, and it had to do with him reaching sobriety himself and talking about his battle with alcoholism. So there's some pretty sensitive stones that you're trying to unturn here.
Yeah, I think what we realized is we wanted to bring some of the farmers to the forefront. It wasn't all about the professionals. Christian and I are both obviously CPAs, so it would be easy to just go out to market and get a whole bunch of industry pros. And honestly, that's not what we wanted. We wanted to, as we said, the truth about ag, we wanted to actually hear it from the farmers' mouths. And with the consulting side, we deal with a lot of interesting individuals, let's put it that way. And of course, Riley Richards was one of them, which was the alcoholism one and his battle through it and, coming out the other side. And honestly, Dallas Simmons was another one where, wake up and retire one day, right? So we're trying to get those unique stories, but at the same time, give enough content on the business side. And it gave both Christian and I a bit of a platform just to open up, right? Like we speak across North America, but at the same time, we're only reaching, a few hundred a crowd. This just allowed us a spot to just keep talking about stuff that's happening and honestly not be censored is probably not the right word, but allow us to give some opinions that whether you like them or not, you still got to think about them, right?
It's about carrying on that discussion and provoking some thought and getting people to question, okay, I'm doing it this way. Why am I doing it? And maybe it works for me, but it doesn't work for you. And I think it's a big part of what both of us are trying to accomplish for sure. And in this, one of the neat things about agriculture is, and I say a lot of times in my speeches, is that, when we think about the airline industry, running an airline is kind of like running an airline, right? Whether you're Western, you're Canada, United, or Delta, the challenges are really the same. The variables are, pretty parallel. In farming, county to county, province to province, country to country, there's a lot of variables that are similar, but there's a lot of differences. And so that means there's a lot of different ways to reach the outcome that we all desire, whether that's legacy or profitability or whatever that is, lifestyle, business, that's a whole debate in itself. And so I think there's a lot of different discussions to unravel in this whole area of farm business and farm management and telling some of the stories around it.
Yeah, like we always use the line, it's your definition of success, right? For us, success came with acres and size and growth, and that's great. But I've dealt with a lot of farms on the coaching side that success was spending more time with their family, or success was going diversified and bringing in new businesses. So it more ties back to the business mindset of stuff, is that yes, everybody's diverse, everybody's got a different definition of success, but at the same time, there's business principles and there's other items that are similar across the industry. So how do we create kind of the cheat card for everybody to achieve their goals? while still being so diverse across Canada and the US. I mean, I was down in the US a couple of weeks ago, and they're listening down there too, which makes me a little bit happy that we got some viewership down there. But obviously that's the part of having the collaboration with you is let's see how far we can reach with this stuff, and let's get some good conversations, because that's been the funnest part for me, is just hearing the conversations and then what comes out of some people's mouths at times. It's been interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So in the 3 months you've been doing it, but as the host, what's been kind of one of your biggest takeaways?
I think the big one for me, and I heard the line, and I think Dallas said it, and then Riley actually said it too. It was success is on the other side of fear. And it was the one line that I keep remembering and going through in my head, and I've written blogs on it now. And it was more or less hearing those one-liners that they kind of hit you, and they apply in multiple methods of your, whether it's personal life, professional life. So it's just learning from them, I think, was the big one for me, is that I'm hearing stuff that makes me think, which I spend a lot of time in my other occupations here giving people advice. It's kind of nice to take some stuff back in and go home and actually sit down and actually digest it, right?
Yeah, and get a chance to ask some interesting people their thoughts, and sort of pierce into some of the some deeper layers and just on the surface, for sure. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, not only can you get the Truth in Ag podcast through some of the channel, if you're already a viewer, a listener, you can continue to get it where you were doing that through the Truth in Ag podcast distribution and some of the things that are going on with Hebert Ventures. But you can also find it at RealAgriculture.com on the website, on our YouTube channel, and in our podcast stream. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're also, Evan, the cool part is we're going to definitely have you more on this show as well. So there, I get to ask you questions. Look out, man.
I'm looking forward to it. I like, we've done enough podcasts now. I'm kind of getting used to Christian had a few more years experience than I did. And then it's getting a little more lackadaisical. I don't get quite as nervous anymore, Shaun. So I might not be on the hot seat as much.
Well, we can definitely offline. We can definitely share some Christian Hebert stories. I'm sure we'll save those for during the commercial break. So, hey, coming up here on some episodes, the ones that are going to be coming out here soon, what can listeners expect? What are some of the topics, and who are some of the guests?
Yeah, so I mean, we've recorded one with John Stackhouse already. So Christian and him are part of the Kansas project together. So there's a lot of good banter there, and honestly, thought leadership wise, from a position of where he is, it was a great conversation. We've got another one with Clint Fisher, Brain Trust Ag out of the US coming. It's more on the professional side, but at the same time, he's built a business on essentially going on Twitter and getting people to answer questions and giving, different aspects of US agriculture. So excited about those two. And then honestly, I've got a whole bunch of farms that are lining up that I love to have the stories get out there. And, some are success stories, some are deeper personal stories. So it's that part that I love about this is none of them are going to be the same. And they're all going to have a message somewhere there. So I'm as excited as you are to get this moving. Yeah,
cool stuff. And we talk about Canada, we talk about the U.S. We're talking to audience here on Rural Radio 147, farmers across North America. So definitely check it out, the Truth in Ag podcast. You're going to hearing a lot more about it here on Real Agriculture. Well, Evan, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You betcha. Thank you.
If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to get your perspective, especially what's happening between Canada and China. Does Canada need to alter its strategy, wait it out? Maybe some of you, because I've heard from a few that there needs to be financial compensation to farmers for taking it on the chin when it comes to trying to protect the Canadian EV and steel and aluminum industries. What do you think about that? Would that help? You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag Feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Of course, tomorrow, Thursday, we'll have the Farmer Rapid Fire brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada. We'll check in with farmers from across the country, find out how they're making out in their fields, their barns, and in the pasture, and we'll do that tomorrow. Hey, looking forward to it. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.